Penn State tight end Tyler Warren and edge rusher out of Tennessee, James Pearce Jr. are two potential selections that represent a new era for the New Orleans Saints. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, I've got 6 potential selections for the New Orleans Saints at pick number 9 overall, whose names I heard all throughout Combine Week. We'll dive into 2 that the Saints may look to avoid, 2 that the Saints would be very lucky to select at number 9, and 2 that would change everything right off the bat. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, for being here this time, making us your first listen, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets by simply winning your first $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. I've got 2 big names at pick number 9 that I heard all throughout Combine Week that I think would immediately represent a new era for the New Orleans Saints. Even if the production doesn't take off right away in 2025, whatever it might be, right? There's always growth. There's always stabilizing, all these other things. There's always the transition that players have to make going from one level to another. But these 2 players, I think, would change everything for New Orleans Saints in the long term. That's Penn State tight end Tyler Warren, as well as edge rusher out of Tennessee, James Pearce Jr. Those 2 selections to me are the 2 selections that probably bring the Saints, in terms of those that are most likely to be on the board at number 9. I've got another name that we'll get to that's actually my number 1 prospect for the team, but we don't know if that player will make it to number 9 or not. But these 2 are likely to be there at 9 when the Saints select. They're likely to have first round grades from at least several teams around the league. And they're likely to be tempting selections for the New Orleans Saints at number 9, who could go in an entirely different direction. But between these 2 players, I think the Saints could be set. I want to start off with Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end. He didn't work out at the Combine, but we did get some new measurements on him. So we don't have an RAS score or anything like that, relative athletic score on him. But coming in at 6'5", 258 pounds is pretty stellar for the position. 258 pounds, 256 pounds, kind of puts him right in the middle of what you're kind of expecting for him. I think that's a good spot for him. And then at 6'5", I think that's excellent height for any tight end in the NFL. Why is it that I think Tyler Warren represents the new era for the New Orleans Saints if he were the selection? I think the reason why I make a claim like that is because even though I'm not typically a fan of first-round tight ends or tight ends in the top 15, doesn't mean that the Saints aren't. And if the Saints do go with a selection like that at pick number 9 overall, it tells you that they plan on him being a cornerstone, if not the cornerstone of their offense for years to come. I think the ability to have a guy that can be Jimmy Graham-like, I know a lot of people like to compare him to Taysom Hill. I personally don't like that comparison. I look at Tyler Warren and I see Jimmy Graham. I see a guy that can play above the rim. I see a guy that can line up in line, that can line up in the slot, and that can line up out wide. Probably a better blocker than Jimmy was even in his heyday, but that's because that wasn't what Jimmy Graham was asked to do here in New Orleans. So I give him all the credit in the world on that. It just simply wasn't what his role was. And so having a guy like Tyler Warren come in that is like a Jimmy Graham, that is a better blocker, and that is a patented tight end, I think would be a fantastic selection for the New Orleans Saints. Even though at number 9, I feel like it might be a little bit too early. Who cares, right? If the Saints like it, if the Saints want him, if that's the Saints guy, then you go and get him, because this might be your only chance, right? The draft dictates the draft, not personal opinion, right? So if he's not taken at 9, he's going to get taken in the first round. It's not like you're going to be able to sit around until 40 and wait for him. And I don't see the Saints trading back into the first round to get up and grab a guy that they can get that next 5th-year option on, because NFL teams are taking 5th-year options less and less and less because of the rising cost of that 5th-year option, as well as trying to kind of take that off of 3 years of rookie production before you have to make that decision and say, okay, do we think he's going to do better than that? What's the role? All those other things. That's tough. The Saints have 2 decisions to make on that this offseason, Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. I would expect them to probably pick up the 5th-year option on Chris Olave, but I don't think that's a guarantee. And I also don't think they're going to pick up the 5th-year option on Trevor Penning, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested in Trevor Penning staying here in New Orleans. I think we overinflate the importance of the 5th-year option pickup sometimes, where it's becoming less and less possible for teams to pick up those 5th-year options. So with that in mind, trading up to grab a second first-round pick just doesn't feel likely to me, doesn't feel like something that the Saints necessarily need to do. I guess unless there's a quarterback at 30, 31, 32 that they want to go and get, then maybe that's a position you're willing to take the 5th-year option on. But I don't know if there's anybody worth that in this draft. I guess we'll see throughout the draft process, but we'll see where things go. So anyway, with Tyler Warren, I think that he helps to change your offense because of the fact that it gives your offense somebody that the opposing defense has to game plan for, that they have to change for. He gives you a mismatch option that you can move around and reemphasize in different roles each and every week based on where the opposing defense might be weakest. So I think your ability to be able to do that goes a really, really long way if you're the New Orleans Saints. And I think that he represents a big change because that would be Kellen Moore's guy, right? Kellen Moore has had so much success with tight ends throughout his time that a tight end selection in the top 10 in the first round of this year's draft effectively tells you the offense is running through that guy. So I think that's the other reason why I say it changes everything for the team. The other section that I think changes everything for the team is James Pearce Jr., the defensive end / edge rusher / outside linebacker, however it is that you want to look at it, out of Tennessee. Let's take a look at his numbers from the combine. He had a really solid showing. I mean, 6'5", 245 pounds, coming in, showing some explosion in the broad jump at 10 foot 3 inches. But the thing that is the highlight is the official 4.47 40-yard dash. Absolutely outstanding. And the type of guy that, again, would strike fear in the opposition that's standing up across from him. One of the big comparisons that I heard about James Pearce Jr., like player comps. I don't really like to do player comps, but when other people do player comps, I take them at their word, especially good people, or other people that are good at this. And so the big player comp that I kept hearing was Leonard Floyd. Well, Leonard Floyd in Brandon Staley's defense had 10.5 sacks when he was with the Rams. And so I like that comparison. I think that that's one that makes sense. Leonard Floyd built quite similarly in terms of height, weight, has the speed, has the athleticism. James Pearce Jr. has all of that athleticism as well. There are questions around, will he be able to translate to the next level and things like that. But I think in a defense like Brandon Staley's, he's kind of ready-made for what it is that you want. A stand-up edge rusher that can work off the edge, that can also defend the run, and that can get to the quarterback quickly. And I think that alone right there represents massive change for the New Orleans Saints and what they've done in terms of their pass rushing approach over a decade and a half now is relying on speed and athleticism. Massive change from what they have been doing, which has been relying on power and size is effectively what they've been looking at, or size and strength, if you will. And so I think James Pearce Jr., another one that absolutely represents major change for the New Orleans Saints. Looking at the next piece here, I want to dive into my analysis of 2 players that, if they're there at 9, might be the perfect selections for the New Orleans Saints. So we hit the guys that are most likely to be there. How about the guys that aren't necessarily likely to be there? I got 2 that could be revolutionary for the New Orleans Saints. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and the place where new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If you're a new customer, I'll tell you how in just a second. FanDuel is awesome. I love FanDuel. Everything that you're looking for, from money lines to point spreads to player props to same game parlays and more, even live betting. So in the NBA right now, if you miss tip-off, you can still get in so that you can bet on a big fourth quarter comeback or anything like that. There's a ton for you to check out over at FanDuel. And I told you new customers get $150. Here's how it works. New customers over at FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets if they win their first $5 bet. So you put your $5 down for your first bet on a heavy favorite, such as tonight. You have the You've got the Golden State Warriors that are 12.5-point favorites up against the Charlotte Hornets. Put $5 down on the Golden State Warriors. If they win like they're projected to do so, $150 in bonus bets. So it's $150 in bonus bets over at FanDuel.com. That's where we're going to go to get started, so you can make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, family. While Tyler Warren and Pearce Jr. may be likely to be there at 9, two more selections that could be just as representative of the New Orleans Saints' new future may not be. But if they are at 9, oh boy, I'd be sprinting to the podium to take either one of them. We'll look at one on offense, one on defense. Real quick, this is kind of what we're doing for Mock Draft Monday today. I wanted to focus on the first round, and then in tomorrow, I don't care that it's Tuesday, we're going to do Mock Draft Monday again, and then we'll go through a 7-round mock draft on Tuesday, which will probably be posted over at louisianasports.net on Monday if you want to get an early look at it. I'll certainly send it to insiders a little early as well, but I'm focusing on the first round picks because these are the guys that have been the big news makers. I'm going to dive into more in tomorrow's episode, so we're going to kind of do 2 mock draft episodes back to back here to give you as much analysis as I can around these guys at this point following the NFL Combine. And so right now I'm focused on Combine rumors in the first round and all those other things. Tomorrow we'll dive into a post-Combine 7-round mock draft to look at what an entire class could look like. No trades yet, but we'll dive into all of that in tomorrow's episode. So the 2 players that I think might be there, might not be there. In fact, actually, one of them more likely than the other, if I'm being honest. But the 2 players that I think might be there, might not be there at number 9 that could be game-changing for the New Orleans Saints are Arizona wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan, as well as Texas cornerback, let's call him defensive back, Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron is somebody that jumped on my radar here recently, especially after the acquisition of Terry Joseph, the former Longhorns defensive pass game coordinator and secondary coach as the New Orleans Saints defensive pass coordinator. So I want to get to him here in a sec, but let me start off with Tetairoa McMillan. McMillan did not also, just like Tyler Warren, did not participate in combine drills and stuff like that. He's one of the guys that didn't need to, if you ask me. But again, new measurements. So we'll take a look at some of those new measurements. 6'4", 218 pounds, 10-inch hand size with 31.5-inch arms. Pretty good. Pretty solid. Like, that's almost offensive tackle arms. Almost offensive tackle arms. He's about 1.5 inches shy of offensive tackle arms there. But, I mean, this just goes to show you that Tetairoa McMillan is the prototype. He 100% matches the prototype. 6'4", 219 pounds. So he's the big body that can play physical, that can get above the rim, all those other things. 10-inch hand size means that he can, snag passes out of the air. And then the arm length just kind of shows you a little bit more of that catch radius that he has. Tetairoa McMillan is the kind of receiver that I look at kind of like, this isn't accurate in terms of build. I'm not talking build anymore. I'm just talking about like this one particular quality that I really like about Tetairoa McMillan. But between McMillan and Stephon Diggs, who are not the same physique wise, but Stephon Diggs had an insane catch radius, and so he became an accuracy guy. He became an inaccuracy eraser. It's why he was the perfect addition for Josh Allen in Buffalo at that point in Josh Allen's career, where he was still still becoming a better passer, right? He was still becoming a passer that could deliver the ball accurately and all that. This past season's MVP, deservedly so. I thought Lamar and him were neck and neck, of course, but I think that you look at the way that he has developed as a passer, and before he was that, he was still looking accurate at an earlier point. And a big reason why is because Stephon Diggs is one of those guys that you just kind of throw in the vicinity of, and Stephon Diggs is probably going to come down with it, right? He's more likely to come down with it than not. I think Tetairoa McMillan's very similar. He's an inaccuracy eraser. And for a team that has put together a staff that at least suggests that they're interested in developing young quarterbacks at some point in the near future, I think that's an important thing to have on your offense. You look at the head coach as a former quarterback, offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier is a former quarterback, and then, of course, Scott Tolzien, the quarterback coach, is a former NFL quarterback as well. Kellen Moore, of course, the head coach. That shows you that they're at least interested and prepared to develop young quarterbacks. And they'll be doing that no matter what, right? Because Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener are behind Derek Carr. Those guys, at least we assume. And so those guys will continue to get background development with some of the other coaching staff. I do wonder if the coaching staff is going to focus more on one of those two quarterbacks as opposed to trying to be nice to both of them. But we'll get to that topic later on this week because I think that's absolutely what they should do. And it's clear who the focus should be. But I think that when you look at a guy like Tetairoa McMillan and how he could benefit a young passer in the future, and even how he could benefit Derek Carr, who struggles to throw not deep, he's great deep, but struggles sometimes to be able to hit those kind of crossing patterns, the out routes, things like that. A lot of those passes kind of go outside the frame or behind. Other times he hits them perfect, which is just part of the up and down of any quarterback in the NFL. I think a guy like Tetairoa McMillan erases a lot of that for you, right? To where if it's just outside the frame, he's got the length to go out there and get it. If it's behind him, he's got the length to reach back. He also has the athleticism, all those other things. I know we didn't get a chance to see that on the combine floor, but it's on his tape, right? And that's kind of the most important thing. So I think that he is a guy at pick number 9. If he's still there, he's still, to me, my number one prospect for the New Orleans Saints. I think him and Mason Graham are right there for me, but that's my guy, right? Like that's the my guy of this draft, I think, when it comes to 9, to where if he's still on the board somehow at pick 9, I think you rush to go and get him. Now, maybe more likely that he'll be on the board, but he is skyrocketing right now, is cornerback Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron is somebody that has kind of had this, maybe been the fastest riser outside of one other defensive player that we'll talk about in the next round of the show when we dive into players the Saints might need to avoid. But Jahdae Barron is one I don't think you have to be afraid of. Cornerback slash safety slash nickel, kind of put him wherever you want. I think the versatility that he would bring along with a guy like Alontae Taylor, along with a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who I know Tony Pauline had that report that I wrote about over at LouisianaSports.net that the Saints are considering releasing Tyrann Mathieu. I wouldn't overreact to that. To me, that feels like a nonsensical move. Safety is already a big enough need. Why would you deepen it by getting rid of one of your defensive leaders? Like, let Tyrann Mathieu play his days out here in New Orleans. Just let it happen. It's fine because he's still contributing and he played 17 games, even though he was dealing with injury, but played 17 games. Anyway, despite all that, I think a guy like Jahdae Barron would be a perfect addition next to guys like that. Let's take a look at some of his numbers from the combine as we dive into it. 5'10", 194 pounds, 5'10", maybe a little bit undersized from the Saints' typical prototype, but not undersized when it comes to Brandon Staley, the new defensive coordinator's prototype. Remember, Brandon Staley drafted in the second round a couple years ago, Asante Samuel Jr., who measured in at 5'10" and then like 170, 180 pounds. So him coming in at Jahdae Barron coming in at 194 pounds is great. And weight, I don't really worry too much about during the combine because guys train at different weights than they actually play. So he'd probably play at a bigger weight. But a 4.39 40-yard dash, 35-inch vert, 10-foot 3-inch broad jump, all showing you some explosivity, as well as some, I don't even know if explosivity is a word, some explosion, as well as showing you certainly the speed that he has. Partner that with versatility, football IQ, and a familiar face in the building in Terry Joseph. I think that could go a long way for New Orleans. So Jahdae Barron, another one that I would add to that first round list. And a name that I heard over the course of the combine. I think it might be a little bit connected more to Terry Joseph than anything else, if I'm being honest, but a name that we should be watching out for because connections in the coaching staff matter. Connections in the coaching staff do mean something. So we'll see where things go. And again, there's nothing about Jahdae Barron that does not make him a fit for Brandon Staley. In fact, his versatility, his flexibility, and his ability to move around is right up the alley of a Brandon Staley for his defense. So him and Tetairoa McMillan, guys where if they're there at 9, tend to be equally lucky to have those guys. Tetairoa McMillan's case, probably even more lucky than as they are with guys like Tyler Warren and James Pearce Jr. Coming up next, 2 players, one on offense, one on defense, the New Orleans Saints may need to avoid in this year's draft, including a name that hurts my soul. I'll tell you who it is as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints have 2 more names that I heard commonly connected to them throughout Combine Week that they might need to avoid, especially after the Combine. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here. We'll have a fresh episode for you tomorrow. We're going to take our mock draft Monday, our 7-round mock draft, do that tomorrow. Today, we're focused. I'm from Memphis all of a sudden. Focused on first round picks is what we're going to be looking at. All right, so take a look at 2 prospects that the New Orleans Saints may need to avoid even though they're going to be commonly connected over the course of this offseason in the NFL draft. The first of which is Texas A&M defensive end Shemar Stewart. Listen, I get it. Athletic as all get out. Perfect prototype for an NFL defensive end, all those other things. But I can't get over 4.5 career sacks over the course of 3 seasons, 1.5 sack in each season. I can't get over that. I can't get over a lack of production for a first round selection. And to me, that's the focus. The Marcus Davenport pick and the Peyton Turner pick are going to be the ones that are most commonly referred to and compared to the potential of a Shemar Stewart. Honestly, I don't even see those being the same. Peyton Turner at least had, good enough production. Marcus Davenport to me was light years the worst selection out of even these 3. If the Saints were to take Shemar Stewart at 9, although Shemar Stewart would be pretty close. But like Davenport was, giving up a first round pick and moving up and hampering yourself in your future and all these other things, like all with this arrogance of like, well, if we want a first round pick, we'll go get a first round pick. Of course you want a first round pick. Like, what do you mean? If we want a first round pick, you want a first round pick. And so I think the Davenport selection, like let's say the Saints were to select Shemar Stewart in the first round of this year's draft, I would probably go Davenport, Stewart, Turner. That would be my order of most concerning or worst, however it is that you want to phrase it, right? Pick out of those 3 first round defensive ends, because at least Peyton Turner was like a stick and pick at the end of the first round, whatever, and all those other things. To me, like Stewart would be worse than that. I think he can be a really good pro. I really do. I don't think that the Saints in particular are in the position right now with the 9th overall selection to say, let me get a project. Let me get a development guy that could turn into an excellent edge rusher. I'll take the L on that. I would take the L on not making that move in favor of getting a more guaranteed W, unless something gets in the way, right? Like the 4 names that we just mentioned, Tyler Warren, James Pearce Jr., Tetairoa, McMillan, Jahdae, Barron. I have a lot more faith that those guys will pan out. If they don't, something probably got in the way that's unforeseen. That's fine. That's the draft. You roll the dice in those cases. But I'm not rolling the dice on a lack of production. But let me show you why. Let me tell you why Shemar Stewart is a name that is constantly popping up for the New Orleans Saints. This is very simple. The dude is a dude. 6'5", 267 pounds, 4.59 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical leap, 10-foot 11-inch broad jump, and unofficial perfect score, RAS, relative athletic score, of 10.00. This is why. Oh, and by the way, also 34.13 in terms of his arm length as well. I think, what is that, 1/8? I don't know. No one. If I got that wrong, no one tell anyone about that. Ever. That's our secret. Our secret. All right. So I think I get it. I understand why he's going to be a popular name. But 4.5 sacks over the course of his 3 seasons over with Texas A&M, I cannot get over that, right? Like that is a hump that is a hurdle I'm not willing to jump. You know what I mean? And so I think you got to avoid that. I think the Saints, if they were picking number 9 because they finished in the playoffs but traded or swapped first round picks and got the first round pick of a team that did worse, sure, fine, right? You have a complete roster probably at that point, or a closer to complete roster at that point. You're not in that position. You're not that guy, pal. Like, that's not who you are right now as the New Orleans Saints. And so no time for projects, no time for all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's that this to me is a pick that they should avoid. I'm going to give you another pick that they may need to avoid. But here's my disclaimer on this. I still like the player. Okay? I like the player, but what I like does not matter. And I'm aware of that. All right? The Saints might need to avoid him. In the first round at pick number 9, the Saints might need to avoid Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. All right? Listen, this isn't me giving up on Ashton Jeanty. I think Ashton Jeanty is going to be a fantastic pro. Would I take him? Yes. Do I think the New Orleans Saints should take him? Probably not. Probably not. 5'8", 211 pounds. Despite speed concerns, did not work out during his time with at the combine. Also did not do on-field drills. So when we saw the 2023 passing game production followed up by the 2024 lack of passing game production because he was running the football a lot, we wanted to see, could he, run those drills and go out there and do things. 9.25-inch hands, 29.25-inch arms. I mean, he's got what you're looking for, but 5'8", 211 pounds and no speed run at all. Which was a big question for him. Yeah, I get it. I understand the concern. I do. I understand the concern there. Now, I look at Ashton Jeanty not doing combine drills and workouts and stuff like that the same way that I look at Shedeur Sanders, the same way that I look at Tyler Warren, the same way that I look at Tetairoa and McMillan. They ain't got to, right? The only thing that those guys were going to do, potentially, they're more likely to hurt themselves, either physically or in their evaluation, than they are to help themselves in that situation. And so I get not running. Like when you're somebody that's already going to be selected in the top 10, cool. You're good. Have a seat. Chill out. Now, guys that are dealing with injury, like Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan and stuff like that, there were a lot of question marks about his injury status and stuff like that. Like that was kind of telling, right? So we'll see. Ashton Jeanty maybe runs at a pro day or something like that. We'll get a 40-yard dash time at that time. But man, seeing him be able to do that up against what was a phenomenal class of running back workouts, Dylan Sampson, the young running back Jordan James out of Oregon, who's quickly becoming one of my favorites in this class. Omarion Hampton was outstanding at the combine, right? And was outstanding on tape. And so I think you learned, if I really want a running back, I don't have to take one at 9. Oh, Cam Scatterwood, excellent performance at the combine as well. So I think you learned, if I want a star running back, I don't have to take him in the first round. I think the first round running back is back. I still like Ashton Jeanty. I think Ashton Jeanty will get drafted in the first round, but for the Saints, maybe that's a pick to avoid. Oh, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart. But I'm nothing if not a realist. All right. I'm nothing if not a realist. Again, my personal opinions don't matter. All right. Might just have to avoid Ashton Jeanty. All right. Don't let anybody tell you I'm biased. All right. Don't let anybody tell you I'm biased. And don't tell anybody about if I got that measurement conversion wrong in my head. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll dive into our 7-round post-combine mock draft. I'm back home. So we'll have I wasn't able to do weekend episodes with the drive and all that other stuff and everything. So I'm sorry about that. But we'll be right back at the weekend episodes and stuff this weekend. So don't worry. We got you covered here on Locked On Saints. We'll see you here tomorrow. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen. Go and check out Locked On NFL Draft for your second listen. Oh, man, they're doing an awesome job covering everything around the combine. Make sure you go and check them out. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing them and how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.